How we doing, everybody? UFC Thoughts here, and today I'm going to be recapping UFC Vegas 100 Magny vs. Protests. This is actually a pretty fucking sick card. On picks, I did pretty well. I went 8-3, 3-0 on confident picks. The only fights I really missed on were my two underdogs that I picked on the card, and then a guy I'll get to later in the video, but let's just get into this main event, man. Neil Magny versus Carlos Protests. Protests passed the Neil Magny test. He passed it with flying colors, in my personal opinion. I see some people still saying that Carlos's wrestling is still a little suspect, and honestly, I do kind of understand why some people would say that. I know Neil Magny, he's alright, but he is older, and his takedowns aren't honestly the greatest, but Carlos did show a lot of great balance, great fundamentals when it came to grappling, solid defense, and just ability to get out of the clinch in certain moments. Now, sometimes he did kind of do the thing where he just lays his back on the fence, some people do against Neil Magny, like Phil Rowe did, what was his name? Michael Morales in his most recent fight. But Carlos on the feet, he looked a little tentative early on. He usually does. He's trying to find the range. He threw a couple of leg kicks, then the clinch battle happened. Carlos actually took down Neil, which I didn't expect at all. I thought Carlos was, if he would even try to engage in the clinch, he would be trying to throw knees, but he actually took down Neil, and then immediately disengaged after throwing like one ground and pound strike. He got immediately back up. Neil really couldn't get a lot going on the feet. He really was looking for takedowns for the majority of how long the fight lasted. But I mean, Carlos, he didn't land a lot, but when he landed, it seemingly hurt Neil every time he punched him. And some people are already crying that this was a fake fight, that it was fixed, that it was a dive. I'm telling you, this wasn't a dive. This is just how hard Carlos Protests hits motherfuckers. He genuinely has the death touch at welterweight, unlike any we've ever seen before, in my personal opinion. This dude, when he touches people, they literally just die. Carlos, when Neil Magny was coming in, maybe like a minute left into the round, he catches Neil with a right hook, counter right hook, and immediately drops Neil. Neil gets back up. Carlos lets him back up because he never follows people to the ground when he drops them. Neil searched for the clinch again. Carlos finally exited it, and with 10 seconds into the round, Carlos lands a left straight right on the temple of Neil Magny, and Neil Magny goes out cold. He literally dies, and I thought to myself, I was like, did he actually hit him? Because when you watch it live, it doesn't even really seem like he hits Neil Magny, because the angle it looks like, it doesn't even seem like the punch lands. I thought it was a phantom punch, but it was not. It lands directly on his temple. You can see his head shake, and he just folds flat on his face, and Carlos gets yet another walk-off KO on the year. His fifth under the UFC banner, including the Contender Series, of course, but that's 4 KOs in this year for Carlos Protests. This guy is a problem, and I really like his call-outs of Jeff Neal for Australia. I think he is calling a little too high up with the Jack Della Maddalena fight, in my personal opinion. I think Jack Della Maddalena and possibly Sean Brady should be the next fight, depending on if Shavkat does get the fight with Kamaru Usman, whatever happens there. I don't think Leon Edwards will be available by then, but I think Jack Della Maddalena is most likely going to be fighting Sean Brady on that Australia card. I really like his call out of Jeff Neal. I think that fight makes perfect sense. Jeff Neal just fought a almost retired RDA and beat him. Carlos Protests just made Neil Magny look very easy, and Neil Magny beat Jeff Neal, if you guys don't know. They fought a couple of years back. So I think that fight makes a lot of sense depending on how hard you want to push a guy like Carlos Protests. I imagine they want to push him very hard. He has a huge fan base. He has so much aura right now, and everyone loves him. You can tell when the UFC likes a person when they give him a main event in the Apex. That's kind of their way of pushing them. You don't really see these guys that they're pushing super heavily get main events in arenas for some reason. They see how they can do against a kind of well-renowned journeyman, a guy that's like a litmus test in the Apex, and if they pass that test, then they can get fights in arenas on the main card of pay-per-views, or possibly a main event in a fight night with a crowd. But Carlos passed the test with flying colors. Neil Magny, that's a bad loss. That's a really bad KO loss to have. I don't know who he fights next. I am telling you this, it should be Carlos versus Jeff Neal on that Australia card, probably going to be on the pay-per-view. Depending on how they layer up that card, I imagine the fights they're trying to get for that is Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. I imagine they're trying to get Jack Della on that card. Steve Urseg's in a weird spot where it's not really like a thing you could get him on that card. Maybe Tai Tuivasa is who they're looking for. Carlos Prates is a guy that you can get on that card that's not Australian, but the Australian fans are going to fucking love him. So, great main event. For as long as it lasted, it was very nerve-wracking because every time Carlos Prates threw, you were like, this could happen. Every single time he was throwing punches, it looked like Neil Magny didn't want a part of it. He looked very scared whenever Carlos landed on him. It's almost like after he dropped him the first time, Neil looked like he didn't want to be in there anymore. It was scary almost how immediately he got dropped the one time and was like, holy shit, what did I get myself into? And then he got knocked out brutally. So, good win. Great win for Carlos Prates. That is how everyone, if you were going to be something, that's how you beat Neil Magny. Unlike unlike some other people who have fought Neil Magny and failed. Let's move to this co-main event. Gerald Meerschaert versus Renard de Ritter. Wild fight, if I'm being honest. It was so good. Honestly, shocked at how uber competitive it was. And a lot of people are dogging on Renard de Ritter because of how sloppy it was, and they're like, this is a fucking 2-division world champ from 1 championship, dude. People forget, man. Gerald Meerschaert's he's a killer, man. Renard de Ritter, he won the first round. He was losing it for the most part, up until he catches Gerald with a straight left, and Gerald is very visibly rocked. And then Renner starts to land a combination and then knocks him down near the end of the first round. The second round, I gave to Gerald Meerschaert based on damage. I think that he did more damage in positions than what Renard de Ritter did, and Renard de Ritter was on his back for quite a bit of that round because he ends up getting reversed because he went for an anaconda, and then Gerald started landing big on him. Not big, but landing some decent ground and pound. And then in the third round, early in the round, Renard de Ritter, he ends up getting a takedown on Gerald Meerschaert, gets him down with his weird, judo throws not judo throws, but little throws he does. He's so long for the division, he can get so low with his legs and trip people. It's so weird, but he tripped Gerald. They have a wild scramble exchange that gasses Gerald Meerschaert out so badly, he can barely move. And then Renard de Ritter ends up on top. He gets the arm triangle almost immediately, slides into top mount, and ends up choking out Gerald Meerschaert. He tapped him out. He Meerschaerted Gerald Meerschaert, which is kind of crazy to say. Renard de Ritter, very entertaining guy for a guy who is mostly seen as a guy with jiu-jitsu prowess. Very fun fight. His style is so awkward to deal with because he has such a weird frame and weird body for the division. I think that Renard de Ritter can actually go pretty far. It just depends on how you matchmake him. If you give him guys with great striking and solid takedown defense, he's probably not going to go too far. But if you give him some guys with some good, striking but kind of shitty takedown defense, Renard de Ritter can probably sub those guys. Renard de Ritter, he is entertaining for a guy who does mostly jiu-jitsu. He's very accurate on the feet as well. He doesn't throw a shit ton, but when he does throw, it's usually decent, I guess. His jab and 1s and 2s are actually pretty good. He throws a lot of teeps to the body. So good win for Renard de Ritter in his debut. A lot of people are shitting on him because they're like, he's a 2-weight world champion. But Gerald Meerschaert isn't an easy fight. Gerald Meerschaert is decent. People doubt Gerald Meerschaert a lot. Gerald is actually, pretty solid. So, good one for Renard de Ritter. We move to the featured fight. Gaston Balanos versus Cortavius Romeos. Gaston Balanos looked really good in this fight, man. Besides some moments where he got taken down in the first and second round, his cardio looked good. His stand-up looked pretty good. There were some moments where Cortavius did land on him, at the end of the first round, where he seemingly got knocked down, but he didn't really get knocked down. It was kind of just a slip. But, Gaston looked really good, man. His cardio looked good. Cortavius Romeos, he's kind of a little too small for the division. He kind of gassed out, kind of allowed himself to get controlled in certain positions, and got kind of toasted on the feet in moments. Kind of sucks to see. It probably was a little too early. Thinking back on it, he didn't fight all that long ago. I think his fight in the Contender Series was in August, I believe, or was it early September? He didn't fight all that long ago, so I probably should have factored that into this fight with a weight cut and all that. But, Gaston Balanos, I didn't expect him to make such drastic increases in his takedown defense and his just grappling prowess in general. He actually was able to roll with Cortavius Romeos in certain moments, and he made some solid adjustments on the ground. Like when Cortavius had his back, he literally just slid out and then landed some ground and pound of his own, which was honestly very impressive to see from Gaston Balanos, who is making rapid improvements. So good win for Gaston Balanos. Very cool to see him win. He's kind of a guy that we've been waiting on to see these improvements. Like from his Aaron Phillip? Is that the guy's name? Aaron Phillips. From that fight where he did get taken down not quite a bit, but he did get taken down in that fight against Aaron Phillips. We've been waiting on these improvements. Then he gets starched by Marcus McGee. A fight like this, I know Cortavius Romeos just got into the UFC, but he isn't bad. He's all right. So that's a good win for Gaston Balanos, especially in his improvements in the grappling. Gaston Balanos, you could probably... Who could he become a guy you could use for bantamweight? Who's some bantamweights on the come up? Who are who you could give Gaston Balanos to, bantamweight, active. Who are some guys on the come up that you could... him versus Beksat Almakhan would be very good. The guy that Umar Nurmagomedov fought? That'd be a fun fight. That seems like a very viable fight, in my opinion. Him versus Damone Blackshaw, who also fought tonight. Some guys that you could give him. Yeah, those fights make a lot of sense. Maybe him versus Victor Hugo, if he could fucking make weight. We move to Luana Pinheiro versus Jillian Robertson. Good win for Jillian Robertson. I was a little scared after the second round where she seemingly couldn't really find her takedowns, but she struggled, and then it seemed like Luana Pinheiro was kind of running away with it, kind of gaining momentum of her own, but she eventually rallied in the third round and ended up dominating Luana for most of that round, and she ended up finding her takedowns in the first round as well. Luana actually looked alright in this fight. She didn't look completely stupid on the ground when it did get there. Her takedown defense did hold up. For the most part, she defended 12 takedowns, which that's not easy to do, especially against a girl like Jillian Robertson, who has just been kind of steamrolling girls, especially as of recently. It's honestly very impressive that she was able to do as well as she did. Jillian Robertson, she did show some holes in her game. Her stand-up still needs some work. She was just getting out, just the speed disadvantage in this fight was kind of very noticeable, especially on the feet from Luana, who does keep her hands low and was kind of jabbing the face of Jillian Robertson off almost the entire fight on the feet. Jillian did show some, her stand-up was alright. She was catching Luana in moments, but for the most part, it was Luana having her way on the feet for the most part. But when it did get to the grappling, when it did get to the clinch exchanges, in the weird scrambling moments on the ground where it was in weird positions, a highlight people are using from this fight is Jillian actually 12-6 elbowing Luana Pinheiro in her fucking butt crack. That I don't even know how much damage that would do. I imagine it sucks. But, yeah, she did find her moments to do damage, especially in the third round where she got a takedown almost immediately into it and got a crucifix position. So, good win for Jillian Robertson. Keeps climbing the rankings. Rankings-wise, who could we give a girl like Jillian Robertson at strawweight? Maybe Angela Hill, coming off the loss to Tabitha Ritchie. Or maybe Lupita Godinez. I think that'd be a solid fight. But yeah, good win for Jillian Robertson. Still needs some improvements on the feet, but her ground game is still pretty solid. We move to the start of the main card. Mansour Abdul Malik versus Dusko Todorovic. Pretty wild fight for as long as it lasted. Dusko basically just kind of got fucking beat up in this fight for the entire time. This fucking egghead. Dusko got rocked by almost every punch that Mansour threw at him. He kept going for leg locks, and he kept getting punished for it. When it got back to the feet after Dusko got let up by Mansour, he got kneed in the fucking face really hard, and then got TKO'd with ground and pound. There's not a lot to talk about in this fight. This is how this fight was always going to go. I hope nobody picked Dusko Todorovic, because he is shit at fighting. Like, he is just bad at fighting people. Like, people were like, put some money on Dusko Todorovic. No. Don't do that. That's a terrible betting advice. Dusko is poop. Like, Dusko is kind of shit at fighting, and I knew this is how this fight was going to go out. Mansur Abdul Malik is still very green, but he did get a crazy good finish against a guy like Dusko Todorovic, who is mid. Mansur, his striking defense is still very suspect, and he did show some solid, like, fundamentals when it came to, like, punishing people when they were doing dumb shit, though. Like, Dusko Todorovic was doing dumb shit, and he punished him for it, which I do like to see, because some guys do panic a lot in leg locks or just, like, leg submissions in general. People do panic a shit ton, but he did punish Dusko for it, and he did it to get the finish. So, good win for him, Mansur Abdul Malik. Middleweight's a weird division where there's not a crazy lot of, like, crazy good contenders. Who are some dudes that we could get him against? Cesar Almeida would be a solid one. Ihor Potieria would be a good person to test him against. Dylan Budka, if he's still even signed by the fucking UFC, you could do him. Medina said he was going to move down to welterweight, didn't he? So not Medina. CLD. Not CLD. I think that's a bit too much of a step up. Bruno Fajea, though. I think Bruno Fajea would be a good matchup for both of them. Bruno coming off the loss to Abbas, but he did make that fight competitive, and Mansur Abdul Malik will most likely stand up with a guy like Bruno Fajea, which will entertain a lot of people. So I think that fight would be a very good fight to make. We move to the featured prelim. Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Denise Gomes. Basically how everyone thought this fight was going to go. Denise Gomes is significantly younger by 15 years to Karolina Kowalkiewicz. She had the speed advantage, and she kind of bullied her the entire fight long. She was just faster. She outlanded Karolina. Every punch she landed on Karolina, you could feel it. Karolina just had the speed disadvantage. Couldn't really get much going throughout the fight. Denise Gomes actually looked pretty good. She is still massively improving for a 24-year-old in MMA, which I do like to see. That is something that I need to see from a girl like Denise Gomes. The last time we saw a girl beat Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Yasmin Lucinda, she got immediately thrown up into the rankings. I imagine we're probably going to see the same thing with a girl like Denise Gomes. She's probably going to get a solid fight in the come-up. What was that? That's strawweight, right? Yeah, strawweight. Let's see what we can match her up with. She did lose to Angela Hill. I mean, you could do her versus, like, Tisha Pennington, or her versus Luana Pinheiro next. I think those are fights that you could give to Denise Gomes. She is quite entertaining. She does have some thud in her punches for a women's strawweight, which is something women's strawweight needs. She does hit pretty hard. She does have that finishing potential. And she also just looked pretty solid. Her striking actually looked decent in moments. So, good win for Denise Gomes. It isn't easy to beat a girl like Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Like, people look at her age and are like, oh, she's washed. Karolina's good. So, that's a great win for Denise Gomes. We move to Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos versus Zack Scruggs. Now, these next couple of fights, there's not going to be a big breakdown for them. This fight was 1 minute and 15 seconds, right? I can't really discuss this fight all that much. So, Eliseo, basically Zack Scruggs got bulldozed by Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos. I don't even remember what he got even, like, hurt by. I think it was a left hook against the cage, and he kind of just crumbled to the ground, and Eliseo unloaded on him with a bunch of ground and pound. Mostly it was blocked, but it kind of just seemed like Zack Scruggs conceded himself to a finish loss in this fight. And I don't really like to see that for a guy like Zack Scruggs, undefeated. A lot of people probably looked at the size advantage and were like, oh, this guy could fucking... He didn't really look... I mean, you can't really even, like, say he didn't look good or anything. It kind of just, like... He kind of got bulldozed by a veteran of the sport who does hit hard. So I don't really blame the kid. Maybe get him a full camp. He took this fight on relatively short notice, like 4 days notice, I believe, for Zack Scruggs. Sucks to see him get beat up as bad as he did. So, yeah, not a lot to break down here. Aleski looked pretty good. I mean, you can't really even, say he looked crazy good because he knocked him out in a minute and 15 seconds. He kind of just bulldozed a younger kid who is probably just came here for the paycheck, Zack, he'll probably be back, maybe, if he even is still signed. Aleski dos Santos kind of just bulldozed the kid. That's about it. We move to Matthew Semelsberger versus Charles Radke. A sub-minute knockout for Charles Radke. He looked very sharp in this fight. Matthew Semelsberger got basically toasted by every punch Charles Radke landed. The first left hook that Matthew got hit by, he looked visibly rocked immediately. He got stutter-stepped, and then Charles Radke unloaded on him, landed a couple of, not a follow-up shots, but just a very concentrated combo on Matthew Semelsberger and basically floored him. I thought it was early at first, but watching it back, Matthew Semelsberger would have gotten brutally knocked out if that fight continued. Great win for Charles Radke. He looked very solid. His combinations are still very much there. He still hits pretty hard. It was weird seeing him on a fight night headlined by Carlos Prates. I was wondering how he would feel emotionally about that, being like, I'm on the fucking undercard of the guy that knocked me out fucking 6 months ago. This motherfucker. But he took it well. Matthew Semelsberger, that's a big win. That's a big, not a lot. I don't think anyone's ever knocked out Matthew Semelsberger that early. Has Matt ever been knocked out in the first round? He usually gets finished late in fights, if I remember correctly. Let me see this. That's the first time he's ever been knocked out in the first round. Every other loss he's had was in the third round. That's a crazy good win for a guy like Charles Radke. Great win. Hits very hard. Combinations look very good. The finishing combination was very good. Good win for Charles Radke. We move to Cody Stamann versus Deone Blackshaw. Good fight. Another first round finish. Deone and Cody were kind of throwing back and forth, kind of going tit for tat. And then Deone kind of just started pressuring Cody very heavily against the cage. He landed a really solid right hand and then just threw a flying knee and rocked Cody and then landed a follow-up 5-punch combination. Cody Stamann shot a takedown on him. Deone originally went with a guillotine and then mounted it with one arm, but he couldn't get that, so then he started throwing some elbows on Cody. Cody ends up giving his back. He gets the back on him. He goes for a face crank at first, and then he finally goes for a short rear naked choke. He laces the choke so beautifully. It's right under Cody Stamann's chin. He ends up choking Cody Stamann. Gets him to tap. Great win for Deone Blackshaw. Like I said in my video, nobody has really ever submitted Cody Stamann. He's only been subbed by 2 guys ever, which is Saeed Nurmagomedov and Aljamain Sterling. Which, that's pretty elite, company to be with if you're Deone Blackshaw. Deone Blackshaw, those are 2 very high-level grappling guys. So that's very good to see for a stock of a guy like Deone Blackshaw, who was coming off such a bad KO loss to Montel Jackson. Great win for Deone Blackshaw. He looked pretty solid on the feet, looked very calm and collected. He didn't randomly jump into, boxing range throwing leg kicks like he did in that Montel Jackson fight, which got him caught. He looked very composed, very, very patient on the feet. He threw the straight punches very well. He avoided a lot of damage. Great performance all around from Deone Blackshaw. Very good. We move to Tresean Gore versus Antonio Trocoli. This dumb fucking idiot. One of the reasons I picked Antonio Trocoli in this fight was because I said he couldn't get guillotined, because he doesn't really go for single legs and double legs. He goes for, body lock takedowns. He'll go low, but he won't, subject his neck. That's exactly what he did against Tresean Gore, and Tresean ended up getting the standing guillotine again against Antonio Trocoli. I mean, you can't even just, I don't even know, dude. Tresean Gore, he was I'll become a double champ by next year. No, you fucking won't, dude. I love the confidence, but you're not. Good win for Tresean Gore. He immediately got a takedown 15 seconds into the fight, and then Antonio kind of got up and then started clinching the shit out of Tresean, and then he just gave up his neck, essentially. So, good win for Tresean Gore. Antonio Trocoli, again, showing that he is mid at middleweight. fitting in the name. Trayshawn Gore gets a win. Cool for you, dude. Good win, bud. Have fun fucking fighting fucking Mansour Abdul Malik, but we move to the start of the entire card. Melissa Mullins versus Claudia Segura. This was bullying at a moment. I didn't like this. This was kind of mean to watch in that second round. Claudia was landing pretty well on Melissa early in the first round, and then Melissa kind of got the takedown and started to find her moments on the ground. At the start of the second round, she basically immediately got Claudia down. And then she started to get into what I called the sexual assault position. She basically got into top mount, gripping one wrist of Claudia, and Claudia, because she is very feminine, just couldn't get her wrist back. So it was basically Melissa abusing Claudia for a portion of this fight, gripping one wrist on top mount and then just laying out ground and pound. This was very mean, and I didn't like watching it. I honestly thought about calling 911. Claudia got finished early in the second round, and Melissa, she basically beat the shit out of Claudia in the second round and like the end of the first round. It was a great win for Melissa Mullins. You gotta make weight though, honey. Come on, you gotta make weight though. You can't be weight bullying your way in women's bantamweight. You can't go higher. Like, there's no women's featherweight division anymore. It doesn't exist. Good win for her though. But yeah, UFC Vegas 100. I gave it a 5 out of 10 pre-card rating. This was honestly one of the better fight nights in the Apex on the entire year, if I'm being honest. Like, fight results wise, like the name value on this card, not great, but the actual fights themselves, very solid. Main event lived up to the hype very much. Carlos Prates ended up getting the knockout. Renard Ritter's debut was very cool. You had some other guys on here. Mansour Abdul Malik was very cool. Charles Radke, again, showing he's cool. Damon Blackshaw, Trayshawn Gore. This card was actually very solid, and I'm very excited for what's next for Carlos Prates, for his call-outs that he had. But, yeah, of course, this upcoming fight week, UFC 309, Madison Square Garden, Jones, Miocic, Chandler versus Oliveira. Very touted fight card on the year. One of the weaker pay-per-views name value-wise, if I'm being honest, but Jones Miocic, he's going to make up for it. I can't wait to see Jones retire after fucking up Miocic. Nah, old man Stippy's going to knock him out. I'm joking, but yeah. Fight week for probably what's going to be John Jones' last fight, so you never know. But yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.